Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story is a little different from what we usually share here. No heartbreak, no scam, no betrayal. Just a man who was drowning in the country that was supposed to take care of him and found a lifeline 7,000 miles away in a place he never imagined he'd call home. This is Bob Henderson's story. He's 72 years old, from Clearwater, Florida, and 2 years ago he was sitting in a studio apartment doing math that didn't work, staring at bills he couldn't pay, wondering if this was really what the golden years were supposed to look like. He had a Social Security check that was supposed to be enough. It wasn't. Not even close. But that same check, that same exact amount of money, became something completely different when he stopped trying to stretch it across American prices and started spending it where it actually had value. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, especially if you're an expat or you've ever thought about retiring abroad. And if Bob's story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe because you're not alone in feeling like the system isn't working anymore. All right, let's get into it. Here's Bob's story, in his own words. I need to be honest with you right from the start. I'm not some adventurer. I'm not brave. I didn't wake up one day and decide to chase some romantic dream of living in Southeast Asia. I moved to Vietnam because I was out of options. Completely, utterly out of options. And I know that doesn't sound inspiring, but it's the truth. And the truth is where this needs to start. 2 years ago, I was 7 years old and living in a 400 square foot studio apartment in Clearwater, Florida. Not the nice part of Clearwater, not near the beach where the tourists go. I'm talking about one of those apartment complexes off of Highway 19 where the paint is peeling, the pool hasn't worked in 6 years, and you hear your neighbors through the walls like they're sitting in your living room. My rent was $950 a month for 400 square feet. One room. A bathroom where the shower leaked, and the landlord kept saying he'd fix it but never did. A kitchenette with 2 burners and a refrigerator that hummed so loud I couldn't hear the TV sometimes. I want you to understand something. $950 wasn't always impossible for me. I worked for 38 years. I did HVAC installation and repair, started when I was 22, retired at 65 because my knees couldn't take crawling around in attics anymore, and my back was shot. I paid into Social Security every single paycheck. I did everything right, or at least I thought I did. Got married, had 2 kids, bought a house in 1987, the American dream, right? Except I got divorced in 2009. Housing crash, financial stress, we grew apart, the usual story. She got the house and the settlement. Fair enough, we'd both paid into it. I got an apartment. The kids were already grown by then. My daughter Jessica lives in North Carolina with her family. My son Todd is in Colorado. We talk maybe once a month. They've got their own lives, their own problems. I don't blame them. That's just how it goes. So there I was at 70, and my entire income was Social Security. $1,247 a month. I remember that number like it's tattooed on my brain. $1,247. The government says that's what 38 years of work is worth. And maybe in 1985, that would have been something. But in 2023, in Florida, it was a sick joke. Let me break down the math for you, because this is the math that was breaking me. Rent $950, that left me with $297. Electricity, because you can't live in Florida without air conditioning unless you want to die of heat stroke. That was running me about $90 a month in summer, maybe $60 in winter. Let's average it to $75. So now I'm at $222 left. Water and trash, another $40. $182 left. Internet, because I'm not a complete recluse and I needed to pay bills online and stay connected to my kids. Cheapest plan I could find was $55. Now I'm at $127. Car insurance, bare minimum liability on my 2008 Honda Civic, $70 a month. $57 left. $57 for the entire rest of the month, for food, for gas, for medication, for anything that breaks, for toilet paper and laundry soap and shampoo, for the high blood pressure medication I needed that cost me $32 a month, even with Medicare Part 500, for anything resembling a life. I was working part-time at Home Depot, 3 days a week, 4-hour shifts, because Social Security lets you earn a little without penalty, and because I literally had no choice. That brought in maybe another $300, $350 a month. So realistically, I had about $400 for everything beyond rent and utilities. And that sounds like it should work, right? $400 for food and essentials? It didn't work. Groceries at Publix, even buying the cheapest stuff, I was spending at least $200 a month. Pasta, rice, frozen vegetables, chicken when it was on sale, canned soup, peanut butter. I wasn't eating steak. I was eating like a college student, and it still ate up half my remaining money. Gas for the car, even just to get to work, and the grocery store, another 60, 70 bucks. Medication, 32. I'm already over. And God forbid something broke. The Civic needed a new battery in April of 2023, $130. I had to skip medication for 3 weeks to cover it. Had to skip medication because my car battery died. I couldn't afford to go to the dentist. I had a molar that was hurting, probably needed a filling, maybe a root canal. I looked into it. With my Medicare Advantage plan, a root canal was going to run me $800 out of pocket. $800. I was living on rice and canned beans, and they wanted $800 to fix my tooth. So I didn't fix it. I just stopped chewing on that side and took ibuprofen and hoped it wouldn't get infected. My knee, the left one, was getting worse. 38 years of climbing ladders and kneeling on hard surfaces had ground down the cartilage to nothing. Some days, I could barely walk from my car into Home Depot. I asked my doctor about it. He said knee replacement, but the surgery would cost me thousands, even with insurance, plus rehab, plus time off work I couldn't afford. So I bought a knee brace at CVS for $29 and kept limping. This was my life. This was retirement. This was what I got for 4 decades of work. A 400 square foot box, constant pain, skipping medication, eating garbage, counting every single penny, and still coming up short. And the worst part, the part that really hollowed me out, was the loneliness. I'd go whole days without talking to another human being, except the self-checkout machine at Publix telling me to place my item in the bagging area. My coworkers at Home Depot were mostly kids in their 20s who were nice enough, but we had nothing in common. My neighbors kept to themselves. My kids called on my birthday and Christmas. I'd sit in that apartment at night, eating a 99-cent microwave dinner, watching Wheel of Fortune, and I'd think, is this it? Is this all there is until I die? Just hanging on by my fingernails, one unexpected bill away from complete disaster, waiting for my body to give out completely. I'm not suicidal. I want to be clear about that. But I was hopeless. Completely hopeless. There was no light, no future, nothing to look forward to. Just an endless gray stretch of not quite enough. Until eventually, my heart stopped, or I had a stroke, or whatever was going to kill me. Killed me. And maybe that sounds dramatic, but I'm telling you, that's where I was. 70 years old, and just waiting to die, because I couldn't afford to live. It was a Tuesday night in June 2023. I remember because it was a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from Home Depot, my knee was killing me, and I sat down with my laptop to pay my electric bill. I had $63 in my checking account, and the bill was $87. I'd gotten paid 2 days before. This was my reality. I pulled up my bank account and just stared at it. Looked at my Social Security deposit. Looked at my part-time paycheck. Did the math again, like somehow it would be different this time. It wasn't. I don't know why I did it, but I opened YouTube. I think I was just trying to distract myself from the panic rising in my chest. The algorithm served me up one of those videos, you know the kind, about retiring abroad. Some guy in his 50s living in Thailand on $1,200 a month, showing his apartment, his meals, his life. I almost clicked away. Sounded like a scam. Sounded too good to be true. But I was in that apartment, in that situation, and I had nothing else to do, so I watched. He showed his place. 2 bedrooms, furnished, nice building, $250 a month. I thought he was lying. Had to be lying. You can't rent a closet in Florida for $250. He showed grocery shopping. Fresh fruit, vegetables, meat for like $20. A whole week of food. He showed going to the doctor, checkup, blood work, $75, no insurance. He seemed happy. Not fake happy. Actually happy. I watched another video. Then another. Different people, different countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines, Mexico, Portugal. All these Americans, Canadians, Brits, Australians living on Social Security, on pensions, on modest savings, and they weren't just surviving, they were living. Actually living. Going out to eat, traveling, smiling. I stayed up until 3 in the morning that night going down the rabbit hole, reading blogs, reading forums, expat groups on Facebook. The same themes kept coming up: low cost of living, affordable health care, sense of community, better quality of life, and the numbers. Everyone kept posting the numbers, their budgets, and they were real. I could tell they were real because they had the details, the breakdowns, the receipts. Vietnam kept popping up, specifically Da Nang. I'd never heard of Da Nang. Had to look it up on a map. Central Vietnam, on the coast. People were saying you could live well on $800 to $1,000 a month. Live well, not survive. Live well. I did the currency conversion. $1 was about 24,000 Vietnamese dong. My social security check, my pathetic $1,247 that wasn't enough to keep me fed in Florida, would be almost 30 million dong. 30 million. The number was so big it felt absurd. I started taking notes. Actual notes, like I was studying for a test. Average rent for a one-bedroom apartment near the beach in Da Nang, $200 to $300. Utilities, $20 to $30. Food, $200 if you ate local, more if you wanted Western food all the time. Healthcare, a fraction of US costs. Dental work, cheap enough that people were flying there just for dental tourism. Medication, pennies on the dollar. I made a spreadsheet, I'm not kidding. At 70 years old, sitting in my depressing studio at 4 in the morning, I made a spreadsheet. If I moved to Da Nang, if the numbers were even close to accurate, I could live on $700, maybe $800 a month. Comfortably. That would leave me $400. $400 left over every month instead of being in the hole. I could save. I could build an emergency fund. I could see a dentist. I could live. But the fear. Oh man, the fear. I'm 70 years old. I've never been out of the country except to Canada once in 1994. I don't speak Vietnamese. I don't know the culture. What if I got there and it was all wrong? What if I got sick? What if I got scammed? What if I hated it and couldn't afford to come back? What if I was making the stupidest decision of my life? I spent 3 months researching, reading everything, watching every video, joining expat groups and asking questions. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. People told me the truth. Yes, there's a language barrier. Yes, it's a different culture. Yes, it's hot. Yes, there are challenges. But they also told me it was worth it, that they'd never go back, that their only regret was not doing it sooner. I looked at my life in Clearwater. I looked at my bank account. I looked at my future, which was more of the same struggling until I died. And I thought, what exactly do I have to lose? In September 2023, I made the decision. I gave notice at my apartment, gave notice at Home Depot, sold my Honda Civic for $1,800, sold or donated most of my stuff because I couldn't take it anyway, kept 2 suitcases worth of clothes and essentials. I had about $4,200 total saved up between selling the car and closing my savings account. I bought a one-way ticket to Da Nang for $1,100. That left me with $3,000 cash, my social security check hitting every month, and absolutely no backup plan. Jessica thought I'd lost my mind. Dad, you're 70 years old. You can't just move to Vietnam. What if something happens? What about healthcare? What about us? I told her the truth. Nothing was happening here except slow decay. Healthcare was unaffordable here anyway. And as for them, we barely talked as it was. That hurt her, I know it did, but it was true. I promised I'd keep my phone. We could video chat whenever she wanted. Todd was more supportive. He said if it didn't work out, I could crash with him in Colorado for a while. That gave me some comfort, I guess. A tiny safety net, even though I knew I'd never take him up on it. The night before my flight, I sat in that empty studio apartment on a folding chair, because I'd already gotten rid of my furniture. Everything echoed. I had my 2 suitcases by the door, my phone, my passport that had just arrived 2 weeks earlier. I pulled up my bank account one last time, looked at that number, $3,100. My entire net worth. At 70 years old, I was terrified. My hands were shaking. I kept thinking I should call it off, stay, figure something else out. But there was nothing else to figure out. This was it. This was the only move I had left. I slept maybe 2 hours. Got an Uber to Tampa International at 4 a.m., checked my bags, went through security, sat at the gate watching the sun come up over the runways, and thought about how I'd watched the sun come up over those runways 70 years ago, when I was born in Tampa General Hospital, just a few miles from here. My whole life in Florida. Everything I knew. They called my flight. I stood up. My knee was hurting. My stomach was in knots. I had no idea what I was doing. But I got on that plane. I found my seat. I put my seatbelt on. And when we lifted off, when I felt the wheels leave the ground and watched Florida get smaller and smaller below me, I started crying. just quiet tears running down my face while the woman next to me pretended not to notice. I didn't know if I was crying because I was scared or because I was finally doing something different. Maybe both. Probably both. All I knew was there was no going back now. I was 70 years old, flying to the other side of the world, with $3,000 and a dream that my Social Security check might actually mean something somewhere else. That I might actually mean something somewhere else. The plane turned west, and I closed my eyes. And I prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore, that I wasn't making the biggest mistake of my life. The flight was 24 hours with a layover in Tokyo. 24 hours to second-guess everything. 24 hours watching movies I didn't pay attention to, picking at airplane food I couldn't taste, trying to sleep and failing. The guy next to me on the second leg was Australian, maybe mid-50s, and he could tell I was nervous. Asked if it was my first time in Vietnam. I told him it was my first time anywhere, really. He laughed, not mean, just surprised, and said I'd picked a hell of a place to start. Said he'd been going to Da Nang for 5 years, loved it, I'd be fine. That helped a little. Not much, but a little. We landed at Da Nang International Airport at 11 p.m. local time on a Thursday in late September 2023. I remember walking off the plane into that jetway, and the first thing that hit me was the heat. Even at 11 at night, it must have been 85 degrees, and so humid I felt like I was breathing through a wet towel. By the time I got inside the terminal, I was already sweating through my shirt. Everything was in Vietnamese. The signs, the announcements, everything. I could pick out some English here and there, but mostly I was just following the crowd, hoping I was going the right direction. Got to immigration and handed over my passport. This woman looked at it, looked at me, stamped it, handed it back, didn't say a word. Just like that, I was in Vietnam. No ceremony, no welcome. Just a stamp and a passport. And suddenly I'm further from home than I'd ever been in my entire life. Baggage claim, got my 2 suitcases, walked out into the arrivals area, and it was chaos. People everywhere, families greeting each other, taxi drivers holding signs, noise, and movement. And I just stood there like an idiot not knowing what to do next. I booked a hotel online, some budget place for $12 a night, and I'd written down the address, but I didn't know how to get there. The Australian guy from the plane saw me standing there, looking lost, and pointed me toward the taxi stand. Told me, don't pay more than 200,000 dong to get into the city. I had no idea if that was a lot or a little, but I nodded like I understood. Got in a taxi, showed the driver the address on my phone. He nodded, and off we went. It was dark, but I could see enough. Motorbikes everywhere, even at midnight. Hundreds of them, weaving through traffic, whole families on a single bike. Buildings lit up with neon signs I couldn't read. The driver had the windows down, and the warm air was blowing in, and it smelled like exhaust and food and salt water, and something else I couldn't identify. Something foreign. Something that reminded me I was very far from Clearwater. The hotel was down an alley off a main street, narrow little building, maybe 6 rooms total. The kid at the front desk spoke some English, checked me in, showed me to my room on the 3rd floor. No elevator. Had to haul my suitcases up. The room was tiny, smaller than my studio in Florida, but it was clean. Bed, bathroom, air conditioning unit on the wall, small window looking out at the alley. It cost $12. $12 for a night. My apartment in Clearwater cost $32 a day, and this was nicer. I sat on the bed and looked around, and the reality of what I'd done just crashed down on me. I was in Vietnam. I was alone. I was 70 years old, and I didn't know a soul within 7,000 miles, and I didn't speak the language, and what the hell was I thinking? My hands started shaking again. I thought about calling Jessica, but it would be morning in North Carolina, and I didn't want to hear the worry in her voice. I thought about going downstairs and getting back in a taxi and going straight back to the airport, but my flight was gone, and I couldn't afford another one anyway, so I just sat there, 70 years old, sitting on a $12 bed in Vietnam having a mild panic attack. Eventually, I got up, took a shower in the tiny bathroom, laid down, turned off the light, listened to the motorbikes and voices outside, and somehow, impossibly, fell asleep. I woke up at 6 a.m. because my body had no idea what time zone it was in. Laid there for a minute getting my bearings. Remembered where I was. Felt that panic start to rise again, but then I heard something. Music. Vietnamese music playing somewhere outside, and voices, and the sound of the city waking up. I got out of bed, opened the window, and looked out. The alley below was already busy. Woman cooking something over a charcoal grill on the sidewalk. Guy on a motorbike selling bread from baskets hanging off the handlebars. Couple of old Vietnamese men sitting on plastic stools drinking coffee. And the light. The morning light was golden and soft, and the air smelled like charcoal smoke and coffee and grilling meat. And I don't know what happened, but something in my chest loosened just a little. I got dressed, went downstairs, walked out onto the street. Had no plan. Didn't know where I was going. Just started walking. Followed my nose toward what smelled like coffee. Found a little cafe, all open air, plastic tables and stools on the sidewalk. Old woman running it saw me, smiled, said something in Vietnamese. I had no idea what. I pointed at what the guy next to me was drinking and held up one finger. She nodded, disappeared, came back with this tiny cup of coffee, dark and thick, and a glass of iced tea. Set it down in front of me and said something I assumed was the price. I had no Vietnamese money yet. Pulled out a $5 bill. Her eyes went wide and she shook her head, pulled out her phone, typed into a translator app, 15,000 dong. I had no concept of money yet, so I just pulled out my wallet and she took the 5. Went inside, came back with a huge pile of Vietnamese money as change. I counted it later. She'd given me 105,000 back. The coffee cost 65 cents. I sat there at that plastic table on a sidewalk in Da Nang, Vietnam, drinking the strongest coffee I'd ever had in my life, watching the city wake up around me. And for the first time in, I don't know how long, I felt something other than dread. I felt curious, maybe even a tiny bit excited. I spent that first day just walking, getting my bearings, figuring out where I was. The hotel was about 2 kilometers from My Cay Beach. I didn't know that until I walked there. Just followed streets that seemed to go toward the ocean, and eventually I hit it. White sand, turquoise water, almost nobody there in the morning. I took off my shoes and walked on the beach, and it was so beautiful it hurt. When was the last time I'd been on a beach? 10 years? 15? Couldn't afford to go to the beach when I lived 20 miles from one. That afternoon I found a money changer, converted $500 to Vietnamese dong, walked out with almost 12 million in cash. 12 million. I kept counting it. It felt like Monopoly money, but it was real. I was a millionaire in dong and broke in dollars, and the absurdity of it made me laugh out loud on the street. I found a Grab app, the Vietnamese version of Uber, got it working on my phone, found a language translation app, found a currency converter, started building my toolkit. That night, I ate at a local restaurant near the hotel, pointed at a picture on the menu, got a huge bowl of noodle soup with beef and vegetables and herbs, a plate of spring rolls, and a beer. The whole thing cost 90,000 dong, $3.75. I ate until I was stuffed. $3.75. The second day I met another American. Found him at a coffee shop near the beach. Recognized him as a foreigner from the way he carried himself. Turned out his name was Larry. He was 67, from Oregon. Been in Da Nang for 3 years. I bought him a coffee and basically interrogated him for 2 hours. He was living on his Social Security too, about $1,300 a month, and he walked me through everything. Where to look for apartments, which areas were good, how to get a visa, where to buy groceries, which hospitals to use, how to rent a motorbike. He gave me his phone number and told me to call if I needed anything. Just like that. A stranger helping a stranger because we were both expats trying to figure it out. Larry introduced me to 2 other guys that week, Mike from Australia and Hans from Germany. Both retired, both living on modest pensions, both loving it. They took me around, showed me the good local restaurants, showed me the market, showed me how to cross the street without getting killed by motorbikes, which is basically just walk at a steady pace and let them flow around you like water. Showed me in Thuong area, where a lot of expats lived. Showed me how life worked here. By the end of the first week, I'd found an apartment. Hans knew a landlord, Vietnamese guy who spoke decent English, had a 1-bedroom place available. I went to look at it. 4th floor, no elevator, but I'd dealt with worse. Furnished, 1 bedroom, living room, kitchen, bathroom, tile floors, balcony overlooking the street, 10-minute walk to the beach, air conditioning in the bedroom. It was maybe 500 square feet, bit bigger than my Clearwater studio, and infinitely nicer. He wanted 6 million dong per month. I did the math on my phone. $250. $250 a month. I asked when I could move in. He said tomorrow if I wanted. Asked for first and last month rent plus 1 month deposit. 18 million dong, $750. I paid him in cash right there. He gave me a receipt and keys, and just like that I had a home. A week in Vietnam and I had a home that cost less than a third of what I was paying in Florida. Moving in was easy since I had 2 suitcases worth of stuff. The landlord had furnished it with a bed, a couch, a table, a TV, a refrigerator, everything I needed. I bought sheets and towels at a market for 300,000 dong, bought some dishes and silverware and pots for another 200,000, bought some food at a grocery store, still trying to figure out what things were. But I got rice and eggs and vegetables and some meat and coffee and spent maybe 400,000 dong. My first grocery trip for the week, about $17. I set up my little apartment and it felt surreal. I had a place, a nice place, a place I could afford, a place with a balcony where I could sit and watch the street and drink coffee in the morning. I video called Jessica and showed her around. She seemed less worried after seeing it, asked if I was eating okay, if I was safe, if I'd made any friends. I told her about Larry and Mike and Hans, told her about the beach, told her I was okay, and I meant it. I actually meant it. The second month is when things really started to click. I figured out my routine. Wake up around 6, make coffee, sit on the balcony, walk to a local cafe for breakfast. Banh Mi, Vietnamese sandwich, on fresh bread with pork and vegetables and cilantro, 20,000 dong, 85 cents. Better than any sandwich I'd had in America. Walk on the beach. Come back, shower, maybe take a Vietnamese lesson online that I'd found for $10 an hour. Afternoon, explore on a rented motorbike. I rented a Honda Wave for 1.2 million dong a month, $50, and it gave me freedom. I could go anywhere. The Marble Mountains, the Dragon Bridge, riverside markets, temples. Lunch was usually at a Com Tam place, broken rice with grilled pork and a fried egg and vegetables. 35,000 dong, $1.50. Dinner. Sometimes I cooked, sometimes I went out. If I went out, I'd spend maybe 100,000 dong, $4. If I cooked, even less. I was eating fresh food, real food, and spending less than half what I spent on garbage frozen dinners in Florida. And the people. The Vietnamese people were so kind. I'd try to speak Vietnamese, butcher the tones completely, and they'd smile and help me. The woman who ran the cafe near my apartment, her name was Lan, started teaching me phrases. Good morning, thank you. How much? Delicious. She wouldn't let me pay for coffee anymore. Just refused. Said I was a regular now, coffee was free, but I had to practice Vietnamese with her. Deal. But the real revelation was healthcare. My knee was still hurting. Larry told me about a place that did acupuncture and massage therapy. I was skeptical. But at this point, what did I have to lose? Went in. Young Vietnamese woman, spoke decent English, had me fill out a form, examined my knee, explained what she wanted to do. I asked how much. She said 300,000 dong per session. I almost fell over. 1250 per session. In Florida, I'd looked into physical therapy, and my copay alone was going to be $60 per session. I booked 3 sessions for the week. She did acupuncture and massage and some kind of heat therapy. And I'm not going to lie, it hurt. But after 3 sessions, my knee felt better than it had in 5 years. Not perfect, still hurt sometimes, but I could walk without limping. I could go upstairs without wanting to die. I kept going once a week. $50 a month for treatment that was actually working. Then the dental work. I couldn't ignore my tooth anymore. It was really hurting. Larry gave me the name of a dentist, Dr. Nguyen, who a lot of expats used. I was terrified. Dental work in a foreign country, but I couldn't afford it in America, and I couldn't keep living with the pain. Went to Dr. Nguyen's office. Clean, modern, nicer than my dentist's office in Florida had been. Dr. Nguyen spoke perfect English, trained in Australia, examined my tooth. Said I needed a filling, not a root canal, thank God. Asked if I wanted to do it now. I said sure. She numbed me up, did the filling, took maybe 40 minutes. When I went to pay, I braced myself. She said 1.8 million dong. I did the conversion, $75, for a filling. With no insurance, in America the quote had been $350 with my insurance. I sat in my apartment that night just thinking about it. My knee was getting better for $50 a month. My tooth was fixed for $75. I had a nice place for $250 a month. I was eating well for maybe $200 a month. Everything was working. The numbers were real. This was actually real. I did a full accounting at the end of my second month. Rent, $6 million. Electricity had been 400,000 because I ran the air conditioning at night. Water, 80,000. Phone and internet, 200,000. Food, I'd been eating out most meals and spending maybe 5 million. Motorbike rental, 1.2 million. Knee therapy, 1.2 million. Random stuff, toiletries and household items and entertainment, maybe 2 million. Total, about 16 million dong. I pulled up the converter, $670. I'd spent $670 and lived better than I'd lived in years. My Social Security deposited $1,247. I converted most of it to dong, kept a couple hundred in dollars in case of emergency. After I'd paid for everything I had over $500 left. $500. I started a savings account at a Vietnamese bank, walked in with Larry's help, opened an account, deposited 12 million dong. Had a savings account again. At 70 years old in Vietnam, I had a savings account again. The third month, I started teaching English. Not formally, just helping people practice. I'd go to coffee shops and Vietnamese people would come up and ask if they could practice with me. University students mostly. I'd spend an hour or two just talking with them, correcting pronunciation, answering questions about American culture. One girl, her name was Huang, asked if she could pay me to tutor her. I said she didn't need to pay me, but she insisted. We settled on 200,000 dong an hour, about $8. She wanted 3 hours a week. I was making an extra 96,000 a month, not much, but it felt good, felt useful. I started sleeping better. The insomnia I'd had in Florida just disappeared. I was tired at night from walking and activity and being engaged with life. I was waking up rested. My blood pressure, which had been high for years, was coming down. I'd brought a monitor with me and I checked it regularly. It was dropping. Not enough to go off meds yet, but dropping. I lost weight. Didn't mean to. Wasn't trying. But the food was healthier. I was walking 5 or 6 miles a day. I was active. My clothes started fitting looser. I got on a scale at a pharmacy. I'd lost 12 pounds in 3 months. I felt younger. Actually felt younger. My knees still hurt, but less. My back was better from sleeping on a firm mattress. I had energy. At 70 years old, I had energy. Mike and Hans and Larry and I started having a weekly dinner. Every Friday, we'd try a different restaurant. Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, whatever. We'd eat and drink and talk and laugh. Real conversations. About our lives, our kids, politics, stupid jokes, everything. Real friendship. When was the last time I'd had that? When was the last time I'd sat with friends and just enjoyed their company? I couldn't remember. Christmas was coming. My first Christmas away from America. Jessica wanted me to come back for the holidays. I looked at flights, $1,200. I told her I couldn't afford it. She offered to pay. I told her no, save her money, we'd do video chat. She was disappointed, but understood. Todd sent me $100 for Christmas dinner. I used it to take my new friends out for a nice meal, and we toasted to second chances. On Christmas Eve, I sat on my balcony watching the street. Da Nang doesn't celebrate Christmas the same way, but there were some lights, some decorations. I video called both my kids. Showed them my apartment again. Showed them the view. Jessica's kids, my grandkids, said hi. They asked when Grandpa was coming home. I told them this was home now. I saw Jessica's face, the way it changed when I said that. Not anger, just sadness maybe, or acceptance. After the call, I sat there for a long time, thought about where I'd been a year ago, thought about that studio in Clearwater, the desperation, the hopelessness. Thought about sitting on that folding chair the night before my flight, terrified. And here I was. I had a home. I had friends. I had money in savings. I had my health improving. I had a life. An actual life. I pulled up my banking app. My Vietnamese account showed 32 million dong. My American account showed $1,400. I'd been in Vietnam 3 months, and I'd saved over $1,300. In Florida, I'd been going deeper in debt every month. Here, I was building something. Here, I was actually living. I thought about the fear. All that fear before I left. And, yeah, it had been scary. It was still scary sometimes. But the life I'd been living in Florida, that slow death, that was scarier. This, all of this, even with the language barrier and the cultural confusion and being far from family, this was so much better than the alternative. I was 70 years old, sitting on a balcony in Vietnam on Christmas Eve. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I had a future. Not just survival, a future. Things to look forward to, places to explore, people to see, a life worth living. My Social Security check, that same amount that had meant poverty in America, meant freedom here, not wealth. I wasn't rich, but I was free, finally free. 6 months into living in Da Nang, and I woke up one morning in early March 2024 and realized I'd stopped counting days. Back in Florida, I'd counted everything. Days until the next Social Security deposit, days until rent was due, days until I could afford groceries again. Here, I just lived. Woke up, had my coffee, went about my day. It sounds like a small thing, but it wasn't. It meant I wasn't in survival mode anymore. I was just living. My apartment felt like home now. I'd bought some plants from a street vendor, these little succulents that somehow survived despite my complete lack of gardening skills. I'd printed some photos at a shop, pictures of my kids and grandkids, put them in cheap frames from the market. I'd picked up a painting from a local artist, nothing fancy, just a watercolor of Hoi An's Japanese bridge. Cost me 400,000 dong, but I liked it. The place was mine. It had personality. More personality than that Clearwater studio ever had. My Vietnamese was still terrible, but it was better. I could order food without pointing. I could ask for directions. I could do basic small talk with my neighbors. The tones were killing me, still are. Probably always will. I'd say something I thought meant thank you, and people would look confused, and I'd realize I'd accidentally said something about a duck or a cloud or who knows what. But they appreciated that I tried. That counted for something. Lan at the coffee shop, she'd become sort of a surrogate family member. She'd see me coming and have my coffee ready before I even sat down. She'd correct my Vietnamese pronunciation, make me repeat phrases until I got them closer to right. Her husband Duck started teaching me how to play Chinese chess, or tried to anyway. I was awful at it, but he was patient. Their grandson, maybe 8 years old, would practice English with me. We'd made this weird little language exchange arrangement where nobody was getting paid, we were just helping each other. The expat community had grown too. Larry and Mike and Hans were still my core group, but I'd met others. A British couple in their 60s, Trevor and Margaret. A Canadian woman named Susan who was probably 75 and had more energy than all of us combined. A Filipino guy married to a Vietnamese woman, Carlos, who'd been translating and helping us navigate bureaucracy. We'd formed this little tribe. We looked out for each other. When somebody got sick, we checked on them. When somebody needed help figuring out Vietnamese paperwork, we mobbed the problem together. It was community in a way I hadn't experienced since maybe the 80s, before everyone retreated into their separate boxes. The teaching thing had expanded. I was tutoring 3 students now regularly, Huang and 2 others, a guy named Min, who wanted to improve his business English, and a high school girl named Flung, whose parents wanted her ready for university. 6 hours a week at 200,000 dong an hour. That was another $1.2 million per month, about $50. But it wasn't really about the money. It gave me purpose. These kids looked forward to our sessions. I was helping them. I was useful. When you're 70 and spent years feeling invisible and useless, that matters more than the money. Physically, I was doing better than I had in a decade. The weight loss had continued. I was down about 20 pounds total from when I'd arrived. My knee wasn't perfect, would never be perfect, but the weekly therapy sessions had it manageable. I could walk without limping most days. I could go up the 4 flights to my apartment without stopping halfway to catch my breath. My blood pressure had dropped enough that my doctor in Florida, who I still video consulted with occasionally, had lowered my medication dosage. Lower dosage meant the meds cost even less here, down to about 25,000 dong for a month's supply. $1. My blood pressure medication cost $1 a month. I'd gotten a full dental checkup in February. Dr. Nguyen did a cleaning, took x-rays, examined everything. Said my teeth looked good, the filling was holding up fine, but I had some tartar buildup she wanted to clean. Did a deep cleaning. The whole appointment, x-rays and cleaning and exam, cost me 2 million dong. $83. I'd looked up what that would cost in Florida before I left. My dentist had wanted 600 for a deep cleaning with insurance. The mental shift was the biggest thing though. I'd gone from hopeless to hopeful. Sounds corny, but it's true. In Florida, every day was the same shade of gray. Here, every day had possibility. Maybe I'd find a new restaurant. Maybe I'd take a day trip to Hoi An, only 45 minutes away. Maybe I'd meet someone interesting in a coffee shop. Maybe nothing special would happen, but at least I could afford to live while nothing special happened. That baseline security, that knowledge that I wasn't one broken down car away from complete disaster, it changed everything. Money-wise, I'd settled into a rhythm. My expenses averaged about 18 million dong a month now, about $750. Rent was still 6 million. Utilities ran about 700,000 total, depending on how much I used the air conditioning. Food was about 5.5 million, because I was eating out more, trying new places, living a little. The motorbike rental, knee therapy, phone and internet, that was another 3 million. Then random stuff, haircuts and toiletries, and the occasional new shirt or pair of shoes, maybe another 2 million. Some months I spent less, some months a bit more, but it averaged out to about 750. That left me roughly $500 a month from my Social Security. I'd been banking most of it. My Vietnamese savings account had grown to over 70 million dong by March. That was about $2,900. I had a $3,000 emergency fund. Me, the guy who'd had $63 in his checking account 18 months ago. The psychological weight that lifted, knowing I had a cushion, I can't even describe it. My daughter Jessica came to visit in April. She'd been worried about me, wanted to see with her own eyes that I was okay. I was nervous about it, nervous she'd hate it, nervous she'd try to talk me into coming back, nervous she'd see something I wasn't seeing, some disaster waiting to happen. She stayed in a hotel near my place, one of the nicer ones on the beach, about $45 a night. I met her at the airport, and I could see her doing the same thing I'd done 8 months earlier, looking around trying to process everything. The motorbikes, the heat, the foreignness of it all. She looked scared. We got a taxi to her hotel, and she barely spoke, just stared out the window. But the next morning when I took her to Lan's cafe for breakfast, something shifted. Lan was so warm, so welcoming, brought out extra food, wouldn't let Jessica pay for anything. We walked on the beach and Jessica just stopped and stared at the ocean and said, "Dad, you live 10 minutes from this." Showed her my apartment. She walked around, looked at everything, saw the photos she'd sent me on the wall, saw that I'd made it a home. She got quiet and I thought she was upset. But then she hugged me and said, "You look good, Dad. You look really good." We spent a week together. I showed her everything. The markets, the temples, the marble mountains. Took her to Hoi An for a day, walked the old town, got clothes made at a tailor shop. She bought 3 custom dresses for $150 total. Couldn't believe it. We ate at all my regular places. She met my friends, met my students. We took a cooking class together, learned to make pho and spring rolls. We laughed more in that week than we'd laughed in years. One night, we were sitting on my balcony drinking Vietnamese beer. These cans of Saigon Special that cost 12,000 dong each, 50 cents. And she said, "I get it now. I didn't understand before, but I get it." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You weren't running away from us. You were running toward a life you could actually live. And you were right. This is better. This is so much better than that apartment in Clearwater." She asked the hard questions too. What if you get really sick? What if you need serious medical care? What about when you get older and can't take care of yourself? I told her the truth. I didn't have all the answers. If I got cancer or needed major surgery, I'd probably have to go back to the States, and that would be financially devastating, and I might end up having to live with her or Todd. But that was true in Florida too. I couldn't afford serious medical care there either. At least here I could afford preventive care, could stay healthier longer, could have some quality of life before the inevitable happened. She left after a week, and we both cried at the airport. But it was different than the tears when I'd left. These were good tears. Understanding tears. She made me promise to visit for Christmas. I told her I'd try to save up for it. She said if I couldn't afford it, she'd pay for the ticket. We'd work it out. Before she went through security, she turned around and said, "I'm proud of you, Dad. I know that's weird to say to your parent, but I'm proud of you for doing this." After she left, I realized something. I'd been worried about being a burden, about being the father who'd abandoned his family to move across the world. But Jessica saw it differently now. She saw that I'd taken control of my life, that I'd made a hard choice and it had worked out, that I was happy, and that made her happy. Our relationship was actually better now than it had been in years because I wasn't calling her stressed about money, wasn't complaining about how hard everything was. I was telling her about cooking classes and beach walks and new friends. By June, I'd been in Vietnam 9 months, and I started thinking seriously about the future. The tourist visa situation was a bit complicated. I'd been doing visa runs, leaving the country every couple months to reset, going to Cambodia or Thailand for a few days, then coming back. It was a hassle but manageable. Some expats were getting longer-term visas through various means, retirement visas or business visas or volunteer visas. It was a gray area, ever-changing, but people made it work. I talked to Carlos about it. He walked me through the options, said the rules changed a lot, but right now, the easiest thing was probably to keep doing visa runs or find a Vietnamese company that would sponsor a business visa for a fee. Neither option was perfect, but both were doable. I decided to keep doing visa runs for now. I actually didn't mind them. An excuse to explore Cambodia and Thailand? A few days in Phnom Penh or Bangkok every couple months? I could handle that. The bigger question was, what if something happened to me here? What if I fell, broke a hip, ended up in a hospital? Larry had a whole plan worked out. He'd made a list of people to contact, had money set aside for emergency evacuation if needed, had talked to his kids about worst-case scenarios. I needed to do the same. I sat down and wrote it all out. Emergency contacts, bank account information, passwords, where my important documents were. Who to call if I ended up unconscious somewhere. I sent it all to Jessica and Todd, morbid stuff, but necessary. But here's the thing. Those same emergencies could have happened in Florida. I could have had a stroke in my studio apartment and laid there for days before anyone found me, because I barely knew my neighbors and my kids were 1,000 miles away. At least here I had daily contact with people. Lan would notice if I didn't show up for coffee. My students would notice if I missed our sessions. My friends checked in on each other. In some ways, I was safer here than I'd been in Florida, socially at least. The heat in summer was brutal, I'm not going to lie. May and June, it was hitting 95, 100 degrees, humidity like you wouldn't believe. My electricity bill went up because I was running the air conditioning more. Jumped to almost $1,000,000, $42, still cheaper than Florida in summer. And I adjusted. Didn't go out during the hottest parts of the day. Went to the beach in the early morning or late afternoon. Took a midday nap like the locals did. Drank a lot of water. Accepted that I was going to sweat through my shirt every day, and that was just life. I started keeping a video diary. Partly for my grandkids, so they'd have something to remember me by, but partly just for me. Documenting the experience. I'd set up my phone and just talk about my day, about what I'd learned, about the challenges and the joys. Watch some of them back and barely recognize myself. The guy in those videos looked relaxed, happy, alive. The contrast to how I'd been in Florida was startling. One video I recorded in early July, I talked about money, pulled up my banking apps and showed the numbers. Wanted to be transparent because I'd watched so many YouTube videos before I came, and some of them seemed too good to be true. I wanted to show the real numbers. My Vietnamese savings account had 91 million dong, about $3,800. My US account had $600 as a backup. In 10 months, I'd saved over $4,000 while living better than I'd lived in a decade. That wasn't some fantasy. That was documented reality. I broke down my average monthly spending in detail. Rent, $250, utilities, $35. Food, $230, motorbike, $50. Healthcare, $50 for therapy, plus maybe $20 for medications and occasional doctor visits. Phone and internet, $8. Random expenses, maybe $100 for everything else. Total, about $750. Income, Social Security of $1,247 plus, about $50 from tutoring.net, about $547 left over monthly. Those were real numbers. Anyone could verify them. Da Nang wasn't some magical unicorn city. These costs were standard for living locally, not in fancy expat condos, but like a regular person. I talked about the trade-offs too because it wasn't all perfect. I missed American food sometimes. You could get it here, but it was expensive, and usually not that good. I missed having a car, the independence of it, even though the motorbike was fine for most things. I missed not having a language barrier. Simple things like going to the doctor required more mental energy because I had to translate and explain and make sure I understood. I missed my family physically being there. Video calls were great, but not the same as hugging your grandkids. And there was always the uncertainty. Vietnam could change its visa policies tomorrow. The economy could shift. The political situation could change. I was living in a foreign country at their discretion. I'd never be a citizen. I'd always be a guest. If they decided they didn't want foreign retirees anymore, I'd have to leave. That uncertainty was always there in the background, but weighed against the alternative. Against going back to that studio in Clearwater, to that hopelessness, to that slow-motion disaster, there was no comparison. I'd take uncertainty in Da Nang over certainty of misery in Florida every single time. By the time I hit my 1-year anniversary in September 2024, I'd become a resource for other people considering the move. People would find me through expat forums or Facebook groups, email me, message me, ask questions. Is it really that cheap? Is it safe? Can you really live on Social Security? I'd tell them the truth. Yes, it's really that cheap if you live locally. Yes, it's safe. I've never felt threatened. Yes, you can live on Social Security, but you have to be realistic about your expectations and willing to adapt. I'd tell them what nobody told me before I came. It's not for everyone. If you need everything to be like America, stay in America. If you can't handle heat and humidity, this isn't the place. If you're not willing to learn at least basic Vietnamese, you'll struggle. If you expect everyone to accommodate you, you'll be miserable. But if you can be flexible, if you can embrace being uncomfortable sometimes, if you can appreciate a different culture and a different way of living, then yeah, it can work. It can really work. I threw myself a little 1-year anniversary party, invited all my friends, my students, Lan and Duck, about 20 people total. We went to a restaurant by the river, ate family style, passed around platters of seafood and noodles and vegetables. I gave a speech, thanked everyone for making me feel welcome, for helping me build a life here. Got choked up doing it. These people, most of whom I'd known less than a year, felt more like family than people I'd known in Florida for decades. The bill for the whole dinner, 20 people, came to 6 million dong, $250. I paid it happily. Would have cost me that much for just me and Jessica to eat at a decent restaurant in Florida. Here, it covered a feast for 20 people. The math still shocked me sometimes. That night, I sat on my balcony like I did most nights. My knees didn't hurt. My bank account had money in it. I had plans for tomorrow, a trip to Hoi An with Margaret and Trevor. I had friends. I had students who looked forward to seeing me. I had a life that felt full and meaningful and possible. I thought about that night in the Tampa airport, sitting at the gate, terrified, crying, wondering if I was making a catastrophic mistake. Wished I could go back and tell that version of me, you're going to be okay, better than okay. You're going to be happy. Actually happy. That check you're so worried about, that $1,247 that wasn't enough there, it's going to be enough here. More than enough. You're going to live. I'm 72 years old now. I'm not rich. My net worth is maybe $8,000 split between my savings and what's left in my US account. I'm one serious medical emergency away from potential financial disaster. I don't own property. I don't have a fancy car or expensive things. On paper, by American standards, I'd probably be considered poor. But I'm living in a nice apartment 10 minutes from a beautiful beach. I'm eating fresh, delicious food every day. I'm getting health care that's actually keeping me healthy. I have friends I see regularly. I have work that gives me purpose. I wake up excited about the day instead of dreading it. I'm building memories instead of just waiting to die. For the first time in 20 years, I'm not just surviving. I'm living. Really living. My Social Security check, that same amount that meant hopelessness in America, means freedom in Vietnam. Not because Vietnam is perfect. It's not. But because here, that money has value. And by extension, I have value. I'm not invisible. I'm not disposable. I'm not waiting in a 400 square foot box for my life to be over. I'm 72 years old, and I'm living my best life in Da Nang, Vietnam. If you'd told me 3 years ago that this was possible, I wouldn't have believed you. But it's real. It's my reality, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.